Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Fishbowl Solutions webinar, Unlocking Information Insights with 360-Degree Search. My name is Kim Nygaard. I am a product manager at Fishbowl Solutions for our enterprise search practice. And for those of you who don't know, Fishbowl Solutions is an enterprise search implementer, integrator. We primarily focus on Mindbreeze, Google, and Oracle technologies. The focus of today's presentation is really going to be less on the specific technologies, as in combination or on their own, many of them can enable the kinds of solutions that we're going to take a look at today. So the focus today is really going to be on the ways that the technologies can be put into use, and less on which specific one might be the right fit for an individual customer. But I did want to mention, those are primarily the technologies that we work with on the kinds of projects that we'll be looking at today. We got into the enterprise search business about 8 years ago, and kind of coincidentally, that was also the time that I joined the team here at Fishbowl. So I've been working in this market and with these products for the last 8 years. And Fishbowl as a company has been around for 19 years, really focusing more broadly on topics related to content management and specifically unstructured information, which aligns very well with some of the things that we're going to look at today for 360-degree search. And that really brings us to the agenda for today's webcast. So this is going to be a fairly brief 30-minute webcast kind of introducing the topic of 360-degree search and what we mean when we say that. So we'll talk about that. We'll take a look at some examples of 360-degree search in action, and then kind of talk about what the benefits are of applying 360-degree search to a variety of different use cases. So to get started, what do we mean when we say 360-degree search? I think it's helpful to kind of look at the evolution of search, 360, enterprise search, and kind of those terms and what they mean. So to start out with, let's think about the word search and what do we mean when we talk about this? There's a number of factors that typically come into play when we talk about applying search. Whether that's applying search to business content, whether that's applying search on the web, there are certain features that tend to go along with creating a high quality search experience. These might be facets, the way we can filter and drill down on a larger group of content to get to a smaller group of content. This might be things we do in terms of synonyms and stemming, making the difference between, having to know exactly what someone called something in order to find it to, being able to have more fuzzy match and do more user intent mapping in order to, match things more broadly and better identify content. And that, pairs very well or ties very well into the next piece, which is relevancy. You can't have high quality search experience without good relevancy. So relevancy being the way that the search tool is able to rank and categorize all the things that might match your search term and figure out basically what should show up on page one, what is most relevant, what should you see first. And there's other things we can do, such as previews, to really enrich that search experience. So those are kind of general topics that are important if you want high quality search inside or outside of the enterprise. So the next piece kind of to the pie is this idea of enterprise search. So taking a lot of the things that create a quality search experience and putting those into the workplace. So when we talk about enterprise search, we add on a few more layers. Specifically, those often are security being kind of first and foremost one of the biggest differences between when people talk about, enterprise search versus public search, sort of, how do we make sure that we can do this securely? That means, making someone log in order to see search results. It also typically might mean, doing security trimming on the results themselves so that, when someone in HR does a search, they might see very different content than someone in engineering. Certain engineering teams might see confidential projects that they're working on, whereas other engineering teams would not. Things like that. So security is a very important piece of, kind of coming and bringing search to the enterprise. Another important characteristic of enterprise search is pulling across many different sources. So, the topics on the left related to search, those can be you know, even if you're only searching one set of content, those things can still be very important. But once you layer in multiple sources, in the world of enterprise search, this is typically examples like you might have a content management system, you might have an ERP system, maybe CRM, possibly databases or file shares that you want to search. So, you know, it's sometimes described as, you know, making it so you can Google things at work. That's kind of this idea of multiple sources. If you think about, you know, using Google or other search engines on the public web, you don't have to know where something comes from in order to find it. And that's so much the power of, you know, good search on the public web. And so we want to be able to do the same thing inside the enterprise. And then personalization. Personalization is a little bit different than security. Security is really around, you know, making sure that no one sees things that they aren't permitted to see. Whereas personalization is really more about, you know, even if you maybe can see certain things, what are those things that are most relevant to you? Again, being, you know, inside the enterprise, we often know who's doing searches. We have, you know, knowledge of the entire breadth of content that might be available. We know their role, what department they work in, you know, whether they have direct reports or not. And so we can use different information like that in order to personalize the experience. So then if we want to bring this 360, no pun intended, what do we mean when we actually, you know, talk about 360 search versus enterprise search? And, you know, you can see there's kind of white lines between these different segments of this kind of pie chart model to talk about this idea of 360 search, but it's really not, you know, that black and white. There's definitely kind of gradation between the different buckets. But when we talk about 360 search, typically some of the things that you know, make it different from typical enterprise search are being able to drill down. So drill down being a little bit different than facets. So facets are kind of like, I have a lot of information and I want to use the facets to eliminate noise or see a smaller subset. Drill down could also be maybe called drill into or layers, and I'll show what this means. But, you know, not only can I use facets to see less, but I can click into search results to see more detail about a customer, a support ticket, a maintenance request, and what have you. Modular being the next piece. So oftentimes enterprise search was thought of as, you know, google.com for the enterprise. So you have a big long list of links. They may be coming from many different places. With 360 search, we're looking to create more of a modular view. So seeing different kinds of information about different kinds of sources based on where they're coming from. Kind of being able to have those different segments based on your role, things like that. And then the third piece is around cross-reference and enrichment. And I'll show an illustration of what this means, but it's, as opposed to where you have multiple sources, it's really just talking about you go one place, you see things from different places. With cross-referencing, you can use one source to enrich another. So you're not only getting kind of the sum of each of the parts, but you're making each of the parts greater by enriching them with the other piece. So that's kind of an introduction to, you know, what do we mean when we say 360-degree search. So let's take a look. To start, let's take a look at a traditional enterprise search page. So you can see here we have a traditional type of an enterprise search user interface, and you'll notice that some of the things I mentioned on the previous screen, I have my filters. I do have multiple sources, so I can search CRM, support tickets, and ECM, and they're all in one list, kind of mixed together. I have a company, I have some documents, I have support tickets, and I have some other kind of, you know, relevancy and stemming. You can see here it's matching North Star, even if I, you know, whether or not I have a space, things like that. So this is kind of the first step, and this can be on its own a very powerful tool for many enterprises. But as we kind of compare that to what do we mean when we talk about 360, 360 is even kind of the next level of that. So there's two topics I'm going to point out before I show you kind of the next step of this, which is the 360 view. So the first is, let's talk a little bit about the data sources that we're going to see. So the next couple of screens that I'll show, kind of showing 360-degree search, we're going to be looking at the following 5 types of sources. So the first one is CRM. Not only are we going to look at the companies, but also the people at those companies and sales history of sales. So what has a customer purchased? What are they maybe looking at purchasing in the future? So current and past opportunities. We're going to look at a system called Redmine. So the demo that we're looking at is inspired by the way that we use information here at Fishbowl. We're big fans of kind of eating our own dog food, and we obviously can't show a lot of our own customers' data on a webinar, so we've created kind of a mock with anonymized data, but the sources that you're seeing, this is inspired by the data that we actually use every day. So we have a CRM system with this information. We have a bug tracking system. We use one called Redline, but this could be Jira or any number of other types of like ticketing systems that we keep track of software bugs, enhancement requests. We use Zendesk for support tickets, so this could be ServiceNow or Service Cloud, where our customers can file, questions and things like that. We also use Oracle's CMS system, which is called Web Center, to store both support documents, so KV articles, product manuals, release notes, as well as customer documents, so things like NDAs, sales quotes, statements of work. Those all get stored in the content management system. And then we have an LDAP system with all of our employee information, so title, job title, phone number, things like that. Again, that could be Active Directory, it could be a cloud LDAP or identity store, it could even be like the profile information you have this in SharePoint, somewhere that you kind of have your employee directory. So we're going to take a look at that. The other comment I wanted to make before I show the 360 view has to do with the cross-references that I mentioned. So in this example, we have a user or a person, and we have a document. So in typical enterprise search, you might have people search. So I could search for IT analyst, and I could find Joe. And then you have document search. So I could search for firewall setup, and I would find this document. But when we talk about kind of cross-referencing and enrichment, it's not only that I want to be able to see both of these documents in one place, or if I were to do a query for Joe, I could maybe find both of these because this one is Joe and this one has Joe as the author. But what I want to do is I want to actually enrich this search experience and take it a step further. So if you look at these two items that could exist within our search index, you'll notice I have Joe as the person on this person record matching the author on this document. And that allows me to say, make these connections. I also have this topic here, which is network security. This is a document about network security. And by making cross-references and enriching this data and this data together, I can see that Joe is the author of this document. Joe is an expert on network security. And what that enables me to do is search for network security and find Joe in the experts section. So it's not, even though nowhere in the LDAP system do the words network security appear on Joe's profile, I can search for that. And if I want to know who in the organization is an expert on that topic, who knows about network security, I can find Joe. And we can do this across a lot of different industries and use cases. We've seen scenarios where there's documents in a CMS system and we want to enrich them with additional data for more like technical information around parts or manufacturing type of information that comes from a secondary database. So we can do that by kind of creating these cross-references. So it's bigger than just indexing two sources, but it's using one source to enrich another. So here is the 360 view of the search page that we looked at a couple minutes ago. So you can see here, I'm going to highlight with yellow some of the things that are different. So in addition to having an everything tab, which is kind of your traditional enterprise search, and you can see, documents from a variety of sources, you have the option to, this is where I'm talking about, drill into various types of records to see even more information. You'll also notice that when I search for North Star, I can find who the account manager is for North Star, and I can also find the names of individual contacts who we work with at that company to be able to reach out to them. So I can do this all from this same place. I can also see filtered views if I know I'm looking for a support ticket or I know I'm looking for a company. But to illustrate kind of this drill in approach, let's go ahead and go to the next page here. This is the 360 view of a customer. So in this case, that customer is North Star National Bank. They're a fictional bank that we are using to illustrate this idea of how we pull together data from all these different sources into a unified customer view. So rather than having to go to a bunch of different places to see this, a support engineer or a salesperson can see all of this information in one place. And it's it is leveraging the power of search and relevancy to do things like rank various tickets or pull back relevant context. So it's leveraging kind of this idea of composite application, but doing so with relevancy, fuzzy matching, and enterprise search qualities behind the scenes. So if I go ahead and kind of click through these, I can show you we have account information that's coming out of CRM. And you notice we have a view to then take action if you want to go open up this record in CRM. We have sales history and current opportunities that are also coming from CRM. This would be like a different record type or data source coming out of the CRM system. We have the account manager information coming out of the user directory. So in our case, that would be LDAP. We have contacts who work at the company. We have, if I scroll down a bit here, we have a timeline. So another important or something to consider with these 360 apps is the way that you can show information not only in various modules or lists, but also using other types of visualizations. So timelines are one that we find very often is extremely helpful. So on this timeline, you can see documents. We started out, we signed an NDA, we had some sales that we did, we created some additional quotes, the customer bought some products, then they filed some support tickets. You can see those different kind of documents and interactions as they occurred, on a timeline. And then we can also see the support tickets this customer has filed and any bugs or enhancements that we've logged in our, software management system that have been tied back to an issue or a request made directly by that customer. So hopefully that gives you kind of an idea about this difference between, just, an enterprise search page and what we're talking about when we say 360. I think what is helpful now is to show a few more examples of how you could apply 360 search, and then I'll talk about some of the benefits of the various use cases and how we've seen those applied to different industries and different kinds of customers. So this first example is for parts search and machine service. So you can see you can enter a part number at the top. This particular customer mostly spoke German, so some of the words are in German, but you can, I think, get the idea anyway, because you put in a part number and it shows you where the part is being used. It shows you different drawings of related parts you can click into. It shows you the history of when different tasks have had to happen for that part. And I also think this particular interface does a nice job of showing some of the different visual elements that can often be characteristic of these 360 search apps. So you have some lists, you have some graphics, you have more of a tabular or structured view, and then you have a timeline. Another example is for sales channel enablement. So a salesperson can come in and put in, for example, a customer name. They can see on a map where the customer's headquarters are located. They can then click into it, similar to what I showed previously with the last example, and they can see different opportunities that are in progress. They can see leads related to that client. They can see different relationships that we have with other people at the client, deals that have already been won, and different kinds of tickets that the customer has put in. And then this view here goes along with the first one that we started out with. So the first screen we showed what the 360 view looks like for an account for a customer. We looked at North Star National Bank. What we're looking at here is the 360-degree view of a particular support ticket. So if I'm a support engineer or I have to reply to this customer and try to help them, we can use 360-degree search to better enable that experience. So you'll notice that this is the ticket that I'm currently focused on. So this is a 360-degree view of that ticket. I can jump over to Zendesk where I may actually want to update the ticket. I can see based on the topic. So this ticket has a product assigned to it called Advanced User Security Mapping. And it also has various tags. So I can see based on what's assigned to the ticket, who are some subject matter experts, similar to what we showed at the beginning with the, Joe's an expert on network security example. I can see these are some people that I might want to talk to about the problem that this customer is having. I can also see right from here what other tickets has this customer submitted. I can see other tickets from the Zendesk system as a whole that are related or similar to the one that I'm working on. And this is where search relevancy really comes into play and creates, a better experience than you might get if you were just to create, a query and grab any tickets that have like the same products, for example. Really taking it a step farther by being able to layer in relevancy and the kind of relevancy that you can get from a search engine. So this customer is asking about, how to import rules. Well, here's another ticket from a different customer where they were asking the same questions. You can see how much quicker you could solve problems by being able to really surface all this information up without the person who's assigned this ticket even having to know that, hey, we did this for someone else some other time. And then in addition, right from this view, I can see related documents that are coming from the CMS system for the ticket that I'm focusing on. So I can see KV articles, I can see release notes for the product, I can see the product manual and jump to all of that right from here. So why would you want to do this? If we look at just these three examples, which are really only a few of the ways that you might apply this idea of 360 search to the enterprise, we can see the kinds of things that this enables. So if we look at the first example of kind of parts search or machine service, it really helps you move from a more I wrote that backwards. It should say reactive to a proactive service, because rather than waiting for something to break and then having to go dig into it, this might allow to see what is the ideal time frame to do service and be able to see from one place, okay, these are services that are scheduled, here's similar ones from the past, here's maintenance information from other kinds of content management systems. We've also seen similar types of interfaces used. So in this case, you're maybe maintaining equipment that you own, but we've seen similar interfaces used on the production side. So companies who manufacture physical goods, appliances, or tractors, and they have all these different parts. And so again, search like this can also enable faster time to market or reduce the reuse of similar, redesigning a part that you actually already have, being able to find similar parts, things like that. So we've seen those types of use cases addressed with apps like this. If we think about sales channels and really anyone who interacts with customers, CRM systems obviously are very powerful, but most of the companies that we interact with, and us included, not everything resides in a single CRM system. There's typically other layers, financial systems or support systems, or there's CMS tools, whether that's SharePoint or Oracle or a network share or Google Drive or other cloud-based CMS systems where you have proposals and quotes and presentations. And so being able to know the full history of a customer, also being able to know, what are similar customers, what kinds of things have we sold them, how can we reuse a proposal or a presentation that we used for a previous customer rather than having to spend the time to create it again, which allows you to create, in the case of sales, a more relevant pitch. It allows you to save time by not recreating the wheel, things like that. And then if you look on the right at the last example of customer service, ultimately it's about solving tickets more quickly. So any kind of task where you're a knowledge worker and you're responsible for reacting to some kind of a service request, whether that's technical support for software, whether that's internal types of ticketing systems. A lot of large organizations that we work with there. In fact, we're working on a project right now where it's their kind of employee services group. So someone makes a request to HR because they need some kind of a record update, they want to file a complaint, they need to make changes to something about their employee record, and so all of those tickets have to go somewhere, and then they need to see how have we solved this in the past, what other types of similar tickets have we worked on. You want to keep your customers happy. Now, whether those customers are internal to the organization, so say a help desk supporting the rest of the company within IT, or whether they're external to the organization, a company that creates some kind of product and has outside customers calling in for help, this can be applied. We've also seen this applied in a self-service capacity. So the example that I gave about I'm focusing on a ticket, and oh, here's a bunch of related tickets that I'm able to identify by using the power of search. Not only can you surface that up to your support team, but you could, in some cases, surface that up to your end customers and help them better help themselves. And all of that is really this idea that you want to be able to take an action on knowledge that you maybe didn't even know you had, or you didn't know that you were looking for. So what's next? If any of the things you saw today seem like, that's kind of interesting, we might have a use for that, I kind of want to learn more, what we really recommend is that we would set up a discovery call with you. And during that call, we can talk about, kind of brainstorm some use cases, learn what you kind of have in mind for use cases. We can also show you a live demo, so we can dig a little deeper into some of the things around the art of the possible, what we can do, and then have, a next step after that, we really have a mutual fit discussion. Do we think that what you're trying to do is a good fit for the technology that we have and the kinds of solutions that we've built, and see how that aligns with your goals, prioritize use cases. These projects do not have to be boil the ocean type of projects, so figuring out, is there a certain department or use case that makes sense to start with. If at that point we think it makes sense to, to keep moving forward, then typically we would dive into more what we would call a technical deep dive workshop, start getting into the weeds of mapping your data sources, looking at user personas, UI requirements, security, all of those good things. Certainly, if you have questions about that, ahead of that, it's the kinds of stuff we're happy to discuss, during that next call. So I put our email up on the bottom. We'll probably follow up with most of the folks who attended too, just to check in and see if you have any questions, but certainly if you want to reach out to us, that's probably the best way to get a hold of us, just to send an email to info@fishbowlsolutions.com. This session is being recorded, so you'll get a link to the recording, and if you want to share it with anyone else, you're certainly welcome to do so. So we're just about at the half an hour. I did want to leave a couple of minutes for questions. So let me just see if there's any questions in the Q&A. If you do have any questions and you haven't typed them in, I go ahead and do so. There should be a Q&A panel within the Zoom window. So you can go ahead and type the question in there. We will just take a couple questions since we're running out of time, and then any questions that we don't get to, we will follow up with after the session. So I have a question. It says, how do you know the topic for a record, such as the network security example? So I think that's talking about at the beginning of the session when we had Joe and we had the document and we said, this is a document about network security. So that is a really good question. We can address that in a couple of different ways. So depending on where the data comes from and what kind of attributes you're looking to identify, topic, of course, is one common one. There's a few common ways we do that. One of them is with, if you happen to have traditional metadata, that's obviously the first place we would look, and we would make sure that the metadata on that document is getting ingested into the search engine. The second way that we can do that is with entity extraction. So it doesn't always require a human to go tag data. We typically say if you have metadata, we want to leverage that as best as we can. We want to make sure that that information gets into the index. But if you don't have metadata, let's explore ways other than having to have a human go tag a whole bunch of things that we might be able to categorize information. So there's entity recognition, which can be applied in a few different ways. You can do so with a list. So let's say you want to recognize all of your customer names within full text of different kinds of content. You could supply the list. Here's all of our customer names that we're looking for. You can also use patterns. So with things like ID numbers or other kind of part numbers, product numbers, we often see that those follow a fairly consistent pattern. So we're able to do things like use regular expressions to identify them. And then kind of the third way that's sort of the newest and in a lot of ways most exciting is to use NLP. So to train the machine to identify, rather than from a discrete list, more intelligently, like a human might, what does an organization name look like, or what does a topic look like? How can we know based on things like the sentence structure and the way that the words are relative to one another that the most important topic in this document, the topics are, say, network security and firewall, and the topic of this other document is project management or scheduling, things like that. So that's another way that we can not require humans to go tag something and still be able to apply more topics or other kinds of attributes to the content. That's a great question. I have another question that says, what technology is this? So most of the demo screens that we looked at today were built using Mindbreeze, the Mindbreeze Inspire search engine. We also partner with Google and Google Cloud Search. So typically those are the two technologies that we would recommend and work with when building out a search solution. And that's something that we do talk about more as we get into those discovery meetings, is kind of understanding what your requirements are, kind of talking about the differences between the technologies that we often work with, and helping work together to make a recommendation on what we think would be the best fit. So we are out of time today. We will follow up with any of the remaining questions after the broadcast. And if you have questions that you didn't ask or you think of later, certainly feel free to send a note to that email address, info@fishbowlsolutions.com, and we will definitely get in touch. Thank you all for joining, and have a wonderful day.